In 2016, Catherine Courtney became the CEO of the UK Space Agency, where she witnessed astronaut Tim Peake on his mission to the International Space Station. She opened the UK market to satellite launch, spaceflight, and spaceport operators, creating new economic opportunities for the UK. Today, she advises a number of startups, chairs the Global Network on Sustainability in Space, is a STEM ambassador, and campaigns and lobbies for space sustainability. Please give an astronomical welcome to Catherine Courtney.
Thanks, Christina.
Welcome.
Very happy to be here.
It's really great to have you here. It's not often that we meet people from the space sector, I don't think. That's probably
I'm not the only person working in the space sector in Brighton, but it's a small community. Yeah.
So I think we all have a lot of questions for you. I think the first thing on my mind is how did you get into, how does one get into the space sector? How was it for you?
Yeah, the week I was born, Valentina Tereshkova, the first woman in space, launched into space. And I'd love to say that that's how I started. But actually, what happened was one day my boss at the Department for Business rang me up and said, the chief executive of the space agency is leaving soon, and we haven't managed to recruit a replacement in time. You want to do the job? And I, went and said to my 5-year-old, do you remember that astronaut on telly that you saw? Mommy's boss wants her to be in charge of the part of the government that, is responsible for that astronaut. He said, that sounds cool, Mummy. And I said, I'm not sure I want to do it. That's the truth. There was a lot going on personally and professionally for me at the time. And my predecessor was a rocket scientist, and his predecessor was a rocket scientist, and I am not a rocket scientist. So my son said, Mommy, if you don't try it, you won't know if you'll like it. And I think you should give it a go. And then I just thought, you have to walk the talk as a parent, don't you? You can't just say those things. So I did give it a go and found it was the most fascinating job I'd ever had the opportunity to do, and in a sector that is full of startup entrepreneurial zeal, which reminded me of the things I'd enjoyed the most in my last 6 years in government, was spending time with interesting, innovative startups. So I left in 2017 to work still in the space sector primarily, but to spend a whole lot more of my time with startups. Yeah, wow. I was bitten by the space bug, I like to say. Yeah. So yeah, I'm on a steep learning curve, but there's so many opportunities in space.
And so would you mind talking everybody through what your career was before then? Like, what were you doing before, and why did people come to you for the job?
I think I had a portfolio career before that was a thing. And I lived in lots of different countries, and I did a range of things that, included teaching English as a foreign language and working in global telecoms. For me, the entry into government was largely just a moment in my life where I had my midlife crisis and thought, I've spent the last 7 years in pan-European startups. The bottom has fallen out of the high-yield bond market. The last startup where I was the acting managing director was a spin-out from BT in Martlesham Heath in their incubator there. And I managed to persuade BT that they needed to become an anchor customer, and they decided not to spin it out. And I didn't want to work for BT, so I looked for a job in the Sunday Times, and I ended up being the program director for the National Identity Scheme under the Blair administration. And I then went on to do several kind of tech transformation roles within government, which led me to being the head of entrepreneurship and small business growth policy at the Department for Business. And that's where I was when they tapped me on the shoulder and said, do you want to join the space sector? And I haven't looked back, because that was the best pivot I've ever made.
Okay, and so you brought in quite a bit of that sort of business commercial side into that role, if you said the previous.
Yes, I think that, one of the things that's in short supply in government still today are people with actual hands-on startup experience and also just industry background. So I did have I have a weird mix of having been in a major corporate doing international product development, and then startups, and then government, and then back out again. And I suppose I always said that having started my life really as a teacher of English as a foreign language with my modern languages and anthropology degree, that my core competency is as a translator between the engineers and the marketeers, between the civil servants and the business people. And I've just, managed after 15 years in central government, to add another sort of language to my lexicon. And now, coming back out to the private sector, I help companies communicate with government. And then just generally try to also coach and mentor founders and share my own experience in the startup world.
I'm really intrigued to hear about what that role was like. But I think we talk a little bit just about kind of just general space stuff for a second, because I think to a lot of us it's very foreign, right? So it's something that we don't deal with day to day. Just starting something really high level from your perspective, why do we need to explore space?
So why do we need to explore space? I can give you the kind of big visionary answer, which is, well, actually, there's a thing called the Fermi paradox. Here's something I've learned. I'm not a space scientist. Fermi paradox goes something like this. There are hundreds of billions of stars in our galaxy alone, and hundreds of billions of galaxies in the known universe. And statistically, you've got to assume that there must be many systems where there's an Earth-like planet orbiting a star out there. And yet, as far as anyone's determined, they have never found any signs of intelligent life anywhere else. And so the question is, where is everybody, right? Like, the chances are we just haven't discovered it yet. And when we do, that won't look like life on Earth, but it would still mean that, we're not just like a happy accident in the middle of this vast emptiness. And I think that's why people explore. And then there's a whole bunch of benefits that I think people aren't aware of to the space programs, the space missions. And I love those stories too, because space is hard. It's a harsh environment. And to develop technologies that work in space, the spillover benefits to life here on Earth are pretty remarkable. And I think we all take for granted every day, actually, the space-enabled products and services that we use. So there were things invented for the Apollo program, like laptop computers, that may have taken a whole lot longer if they hadn't needed that solution for the Apollo program. And there's a whole raft of other things like memory foam mattresses and cochlear implants, to bring hearing to those who were born deaf. Those are all things that were technologies developed for space. The Dustbusters, the kind of famous one, that was all about collecting rock samples on the moon. So those technologies have had a life beyond space down here on Earth, but I think it's the data-enabled services from satellites that people just don't think about. So does anyone here have a smartphone with them? Show of hands.
Everyone,
yeah.
I presume.
I'm not going to ask, does anyone not have a smartphone, because that would really make you stick out like a sore thumb. So I don't know how far you traveled today, but in the 1 kilometer walk that I take my kids up the hill to school every day, my phone will have communicated with at least 27 different satellites. And, we all sat at home during the pandemic looking at, our screens, ordering our groceries, the pizza here tonight, that's SatNav. SatNav drives all of those services, any location-specific service, all those new disruptive businesses, Uber, Airbnb, all of those things are driven by satellite navigation signals from satellites in space. And, I think I don't know, we didn't realize that Sky TV meant the TV was coming from the sky, right? But that's what that was, satellite broadcast television service. Now, there is a third wave, I believe, of, services coming, and they're all about Earth observation data, sensor data, imagery, video from space. We can see with the crisis in Ukraine, all of the monitoring of what's going on the ground in Ukraine. Those are actually commercial satellites that are gathering that data and publishing those pictures, on the internet. There's probably a whole bunch of classified stuff that we're not seeing, but the fact that there's so many commercial satellites up there gathering observational data about the Earth and able to share it publicly means that there's going to be a whole nother wave of interesting, innovative applications that uses satellite data. And I don't even know what most of them are. I have met founders, doing really interesting stuff with observation data, and there will be more of that. It's about 3/4 of the value of the global space market is from applications on Earth, not actually from the infrastructure up in space. Yeah.
Wow, so we're basically interacting with space in a way
All the
every
time.
single day, and we don't even know it, take it for granted.
Take it completely for granted, which is why I feel so passionate about keeping space safe, secure, sustainable, and accessible, and that is increasingly becoming a problem.
So let's talk about that. What are the biggest challenges at the moment in the space sector?
I think the biggest problems, from my point of view, is that the space sector has undergone this explosive entrepreneurial growth over the last decade, and it's becoming more congested, but it's also becoming more contested. And we are trying to regulate that market with technologies, tools, techniques, agreements that were kind of first set up in the 1960s and not really changed much since the 1980s. So we're just trying to manage this 21st century explosive entrepreneurial, free-for-all, Wild West, with tools that just aren't fit for purpose.
So at the moment, if you want to, I don't know, you start a company for whatever reason, you want to send a rocket up into space, can anyone do that?
Anyone can do that. You are meant to get an operating license and a launch license and an allocation of radio spectrum.
Right.
And the way that works today is kind of any country can make a space law and start issuing licenses. For the radio spectrum bit, there's a reasonably long-standing governance structure in the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union. But for the orbital capacity, there's nothing like that. And launch licenses, pretty much any nation that sets up a spaceport can give people a launch license. Actually, when I was at the Space Agency, we started the legislative process for the Space Industries Act, which now means that we should be launching rockets from the UK this year, because there are about 7 different spaceports competing for the honor of being the first launch from UK soil. But it wasn't that hard. We just had to pass a law, and talk to some companies about whether they wanted to come and launch from the UK. And yeah, we did have to make sure that they dotted their I's and crossed their T's and cared about the health and safety and, those things. But that's because we're a responsible regulatory kind of, we're well regarded actually in the UK for having business-friendly but reliable regulatory frameworks. That's why investors like to invest in UK licensed companies. But there is a big risk that startups will just go hunting around for flags of convenience and get a launch license from Earth. There was a lovely, well-meaning startup out of the US a few years ago that launched their first 4 satellites with the Indian Space Agency, who had neglected to check whether they had a license to operate once they got up there. And they had to retrospectively apply for an operating license, and they were given it, but they were a bit like, my bad, what are you going to do once they were up there, really? But there's not a lot of that, luckily, but it is a bit of a free-for-all. And there is now, growing concerns the behaviors could be so irresponsible that it would make space too congested for, developing countries to ever join the global space economy, and also just to keep the assets that are already up there operating safely, because there's just too much debris and a growing population of spacecraft, all at risk really of kind of bumping into each other.
And you mentioned about that there's basically been a boom of entrepreneurial activity in the space. Is there a reason? Like, did something enable that, or is it just becoming more popular, or did the government create something to make it more accessible?
So what triggered it, I think, was the U.S. government made a very deliberate decision not long, I think, after they grounded the shuttle program. I mean, space was, for decades, a hugely expensive enterprise with, big institutional missions funded by large institutional, funders. And they took a decision in the U.S. that NASA was going to outsource things. And I remember I did get the chance to meet Charlie Bolden, who was, I guess, the previous NASA administrator, when I was at the agency, at the UK Space Agency. And he said to me, oh, yeah, I let this commercial contract for, $250 million. And it was great what kind of Northrop Grumman and Elon Musk and all of them, have done off the back of it. And I just looked at him and I was like, that is a rounding error on your budget, right? You could take that risk. That was like the whole budget for the UK Space Agency, more or less, at the time, right? So there was no way that UK could do that.
Yeah.
And yet, we're kind of unique in the global space market because the UK backed out of being a launching state in the 70s. We actually had a UK-built satellite on a rocket in Australia that the Australians went ahead and launched because the call to pull the plug came from the UK government, like just before they pushed the button, and they were like, do you know what? We're just going to push the button anyway. So that's a lovely story because Prospero was like that first UK-built satellite launched on a UK rocket, not from UK soil, from Australia, and it's still out there, of course, because I'll say this: like on the motorway, your car breaks down here. You don't just leave in the middle of the motorway for all the next traffic to crash into it. But in space, if your spacecraft breaks down, we don't actually have solutions yet for what to do with that. It's just left up there hurtling around at 15,700 miles an hour, if it happens to be in low Earth orbit. And it will eventually deorbit, but if it's far enough away, that could take hundreds of years, and if it's nearby...
That's crazy. And I remember when I first spoke to you, I think it was a few years ago now, and I think that was the first time I found out about debris in space. Like I never even thought about it. And ever since then, I tell them, because I'm like, people need to know that there's debris all around.
I think
space.
that's why I campaign, because I think people need to care. Like, it's the plastics in the ocean. We can't see it. We can't see the congestion and debris in space, but increasingly, you can see the congestion with the naked eye on a dark night. You can see the Starlink satellites going up in batches of 60. Astronomers have started a campaign to save the dark skies because they're having to develop technologies that edits out all that man-made stuff, because they can't see through it. And so, that is a big problem, is how do people call space a global commons, but how do we actually share it when there aren't any rules of the road? There are no binding rules and regulations about who gets to use space for what purpose. It's all kind of voluntary guidelines. So I think that is a thing that pretty rapidly has to change before either irresponsible behavior or, bellicose behavior, as we've been hearing the head of Roscosmos tweeting about in the last, few months, actually does make space unusable, for a couple hundred years, and we leave it to future generations to solve that problem. But to go back to the happy story, because I didn't finish saying that the UK is kind of unique in that because we went down the road of really investing in telecommunications, Inmarsat, there were all sorts of UK satellite communications initiatives. and then investing in the science that led to things like smaller satellites, that now you can get a satellite, that used to be kind of the size of a London bus. Now satellites, you can get them that you hold in the palm of your hand. And a lot of that commercial exploitation of space was actually led by the UK, which means that we have a very proactive commercial and entrepreneurial space ecosystem here that other countries are kind of trying to run to catch up. What we don't have is Silicon Valley investors, and we don't have Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and all these, internet billionaires who are really the ones driving the new space race and the PR campaign for new space as well. But it doesn't mean that we haven't got a pretty strong position in the commercial space market, because we do, which is we punch way above our weight as a country.
That's really great to hear. I had no idea. And so just to kind of paint a picture of the kind of global activity in the space. So you've got NASA, you've got UK space agencies, basically the UK version of NASA, is that?
Oh yeah, much smaller, but yeah.
And who else are the big players?
China has come up very quickly and is, incredibly proactive about not only investing in scientific missions and things like that, but also in space education and entrepreneurship. So China is very rapidly becoming, an incredibly important player. And then interestingly, countries like India, Israel, they have very, very big space programs. And on the continent, Italy, Germany, France, big space programs as well. And now there are something like 110 signatories to the Outer Space Treaty. And at least kind of 85 of those countries have implemented that into their national law and have launched space agencies and programs. So it is really a global industry. It's a global, it is the internet for 15, 20 years from now. That's why there's so many entrepreneurs interested.
And so to solve these big challenges, about sustainability in space, we'll probably need quite a lot of people in getting into space. Is that a challenge at the moment in the UK or in general for getting people interested?
I love to say my superpower is I'm not a subject matter expert on anything. But what I can see is that having been a regulator, having worked with startups, having worked in industry, what I can see is that I think there is a single key that will unleash the potential for sustainable growth of the space economy. And that key is in better, more transparently shared data about what's going on up there. So, we do not have a single version of the truth of, what is actually happening with the man-made night sky. We have various sources of data, mostly designed for anti-ballistic missile defense purposes, and so not publicly shared, only kind of shared on a need-to-know basis. And then there's some voluntary sharing between satellite operators, again on a need-to-know basis. And everybody is gathering their own data with their own data protocols. They share them in a very kind of too late way, and everybody applies their own bespoke algorithms and modeling tools. And so genuinely, there is no way of determining how congested is it. And it's almost worse than that, because in a way, if you look at kind of the publicly available data sets, I think they were colored by Sputnik. Sputnik was a sphere. So when you see a dot of light from your telescope and it's not a star, you put it down as a spherical object traveling at a certain velocity, right? And it may be that what you're looking at is a rocket body, and you're seeing this, but the object is actually this, and you're still modeling it like a ball. And because of that, none of it's right. None of the data is right. So one of my favorite startups, who, I don't know that well, but I love it. They just came out of stealth in February, is a company called Privateer, based in Maui, and it's the founders are Steve Wozniak and Alex Fielding, so they know how to start a company, and Dr. Maria Bajaw out of Austin, Texas, who's been working on this data mapping, data aggregation, how to get different sources of data to triangulate around a single version of the truth, for his whole, career. He's their chief scientist. And they are basically, trying to build the Google Maps of the man-made night sky, which will solve that problem.
Okay.
And I think there's going to be value in that data as well. That will trigger a whole bunch of, that'll be your fourth wave. After all this Earth observation applications, there'll be data-driven applications that use the data about the space population.
That's
That'll
really
be my
exciting.
kids probably invent those. I don't know, but
And is there a reason that it's not so open source right now? Is it quite competitive? Is that why?
the reason is just that historically, the people who build the big telescopes, they either do them for scientific observations, and so that community sort of sees satellites as shiny objects that get in the way of their science. What I try and do as the chair of the board of the Global Network on Sustainability in Space, we've grown to about 350, 60 members now. The purpose of that network is to bring scientists, principally astronomers, satellite operators, policymakers, et cetera, together to try and get the scientists to help bring their knowledge to bear on being part of the solution for keeping space sustainable, as opposed to, I guess, carping from the sidelines.
Yeah.
My view as a former civil servant, I did 5 cross-cutting pieces of legislation. The first thing I learned in government is you cannot legislate for something you can't enforce. Like, if you can't enforce compliance with a law, don't pass that law. It's pointless. So we don't have binding regulations in space because the truth of who is where and whose fault it is if you bump into something is wholly disputable, right?
Yeah.
There's just no way of attributing causality or liability. So for me, the key that unlocks space for all of us, space access, continued, safe, secure space access for everybody, is solving that problem, the data problem, and then much more transparent sharing of that information. And that will also make it harder for the Russians to, send missiles up last November, blow up one of their own satellites, and create a debris field of 1,500 trackable pieces that made their own cosmonauts have to shelter near the escape pods at the ISS because it was just a really irresponsible thing to do to prove that they had that military capability to take out other people's assets in space. Actually, this week, the UK sponsored a resolution about a year and a half ago at the UN to agree norms of responsible behavior in space. And this week, the open-ended working group that was set up by the UN to tackle that has been going through, its meetings so that now all the nations, even the Russians are there, saying that, they keep saying it's all about not having missiles on a satellite, but, really the rest of the global community is saying it's about, let's agree not to do that again. Let's agree not to create debris on purpose, for one thing. Maybe we can all agree on that. So, watch that space. We'll see what comes out of the working group. But the UN, it's a really slow process, isn't it? So that's why I want to see so many startups taking an interest and getting involved, because I think we need to move fast in that. And we need, for me, it's fundamentally, if you look at, trying to think, so somebody told me a statistic that air travel, right, from the dawn of air travel, it was just a thing for rich people to do, it was a hobby, et cetera. And year on year, the growth of maybe not during the pandemic, right, but year on year, the growth of the air travel and transport industry has outperformed forecasts year on year on year on year since, the Wright brothers. And so we needed regulation and we needed support systems and services. We invented ICAO and we invented the International Civil Aviation Organization, and we invented air traffic management systems that are consistent across the world. And that's what we need. We need an ICAO for space, and we need space traffic management systems that everybody will comply with the same standards. But you can't legislate for something you can't enforce, and if you can't monitor compliance, you can't enforce it. So the key to unlocking all of that is to get all the smart data people to come and work with space data.
Amazing. And in the UK Space Agency, or just in the sector in general in the UK, is it difficult to hire people? Like, is there enough people going into the sector? What's all of that like? Is it diverse?
There's a big competition with every other tech sector, and so that's a problem. And the skills gap, as we know, the STEM skills gap is still a problem, and there's quite a big problem with diversity and inclusion as well. It's a small community. You meet all the same people at the same conferences. And on the science side of the space community in the UK, there are some very brilliant women. And there are some very brilliant women kind of, struggling in splendid isolation, even fewer people of color in the industrial side of the UK space sector. So there is a real need to engage young people, across the UK in aspiring to and taking an interest in STEM careers. And it's one of the things that caused me, because I felt there was real market failure in what the agency did. We funded quite a lot of STEM outreach, and the industry in the UK has made a commitment to 1 million STEM outreach interactions per annum, and they recognize that they have this problem. But the kind of easy people to talk to are the graduates, or the teenagers, but I have 2 8-year-olds and 11-year-old, and I know that by the time my kids get to secondary school, you are preaching to the converted, right? You already have narrowed the pipeline of children who would take a possible interest in a STEM career. So one of the things that I've done since leaving government is to launch a charity which is really focused on primary school pupils and teachers. And our aim is to be kind of the Match.com for space companies, to try and help them talk to those audiences and inspire those kids through careers-related learning. Other people can teach them the actual science and technology and engineering and maths. That's not my forte, but through showing them role models, really diverse role models, and through giving them a way of just drip feeding into the national curriculum conversations about what can you do with this stuff if you had a space job, and trying also to just debunk this myth that you have to be an astronaut to work in space. There are more than 500,000 people in the world work in the space sector, and about 600 of them in the history of space have been astronauts. So it's a tiny minority.
Yeah.
I don't have anything against astronauts. They're very nice people, incredible rock stars, and they have a really important role to play in inspiring kids as well. But when I talk to kids, they're like, I'm like, well, so what do you think? You might want to do something there's somebody has to do the weather forecast to say whether the rocket can launch. That is a cool job, right?
Yeah.
If you are the person who says whether the button gets to be pushed or not. You could be a meteorologist. And, 6 months later, they'll be like, astronaut, that's a really dangerous job. So it's pushing water uphill, but I think it's really important actually to get kids interested in the other jobs you can do. And kids are interested in space.
Yeah. I mean, everyone, always wanted to be an astronaut when they were younger, didn't they? And I think first of all, well done. That's amazing that you're doing that. I think that's so great and such important work. I think that there's something in the whole, making it more accessible and transparent, as you said, so that people hear about this kind of stuff in their day to day. And I can't remember how I came across it. I don't know if it was maybe after I spoke to you and I actually went and found it. But NASA obviously do a lot of, they share live what's happening in the station, and I've watched a few Mars rover takeoffs and landings, and it's very exciting.
Oh, it's super exciting. I mean, did you see the helicopter?
Yeah.
That's amazing. And what's the most amazing thing about it is that the mission director for that helicopter, she is a woman of color, right? So it's like, I love putting her up in front of the kids going, this woman invented a helicopter that's just flown on Mars, And I think you do have to thank the Elon Musks of this world for, doing the rock star thing and, televising their, broadcasting their launches and all of that. What those entrepreneurs are doing in terms of reusable launch and lower cost launch and everything, that's incredibly disruptive and innovative, and rapidly is changing what we can use space for. But on the other side, he is also building a massive constellation of small satellites very close to the Earth, which risks at pace, at a great pace, which risks meaning that it's a land grab, and he's not going to allow enough orbital space for other players to get in.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, he's not the only constellation network, but if you add up all of the constellation network plans around the world since he started, and OneWeb and the early movers, there is definitely not enough space in space for all the satellites that all the countries who have licensed constellation networks or announced their own government-funded ones. There's just not enough space in space for all those satellites. So that is a problem that has to be solved.
Yeah.
And it needs people like Elon Musk to stand up and say that he recognizes it as a problem, and he doesn't. So
Really? Okay. Yeah, that's not
Yeah.
good. Okay. And then I'd love to hear a bit more about your time at the UK Space Agency. What was your day-to-day like? What did you do as the CEO?
It does sound like an incredible job, but it's a civil service job. So, your day does include getting to do cool things like, take your kid to meet Tim Peake at the Farnborough Air Show. And I was able to go out to the Space Symposium in Colorado Springs. I mean, if you want to go to a space conference, go to that one. It's just unbelievable, mind-blowing, everybody launching their things. And that was where Jeff Bezos showed the first, reusable rocket. Elon Musk hadn't launched anything yet, and he announced their success and showed a video of, their rocket going up and landing right back down on the spot that it had taken off from. And so you get to do stuff like that. That's super cool. And the rest of the time you spend pretty much crafting, submissions for ministers and trying to negotiate with the Treasury about the budgets and trying to, what I was trying to do there was to change the culture a bit, because actually the agency had come from a very science-led background, and yet here we were, in this kind of new space race, which was all full of industrial drive and entrepreneurial, fervor. And they just didn't speak that language. And so I did spend a lot of time trying to bring the stakeholders together to say, we need to revise our strategy, our national strategy, and also mobilizing the UK launch program, because we had no budget for that and no legislation that would enable it to happen. So, I just
Creative on that.
had a lot of meetings.
Okay.
I mean, that's a civil service job. You just try and square the circle of getting all the stakeholders on the same page, and then hope you can get the minister to back it and the Treasury to give you the money, and then, you're away. So.
And then you mentioned around a company that's doing something really exciting around the data in space. What other innovations in space are you quite excited about, or what are the next big things? There are a lot of things that are so exciting that are out there as kind of the new space industry. So, we have in this country, quite a lot of activity actually in space sustainability, which is great. Astroscale, is one of the real proactive startups here. They are doing not just a debris removal solution of, being able to go up there, capture a uncontrollable object, which is not easy. Could be tumbling, they're all traveling at 15,700 miles an hour, and deorbit it safely. The companies like that are also interested in life extension for those assets. I mean, satellites are still pretty expensive, so if you can refuel them or recycle them or repurpose them, there's a whole bunch of resources up there already, that you could really extend the useful life of an asset.
There are some more, interesting longer-term things that people are very interested in, like asteroid mining, and creating habitats on the moon and Mars. Finding solutions to being able to use the resources, limited resources on other planets, to create environments that would sustain life, human life, I should say. So there's an awful lot of startups doing stuff like that. And then what I'm seeing, which is great, is, as I say, I think there should be way more startups in the space traffic management space, because 15 years from now, that is going to be a big subsector, a really big subsector. And I think the UK, has a great history in air traffic management, so we should get into that. But, what I am seeing is things like service providers, and I'm the advisor for a startup called Gravity Lab, for instance, who are looking to develop low-cost microgravity, basically demonstrators for people who want to get space credentials for their technology, but haven't got the time, or they don't want to wait for a launch ride share from NASA 3 years from now or whatever, and they don't want to pay huge amounts of money. So Gravity Lab are doing repeatable kind of microgravity experimentation launches. Wow. For science and for tech demonstrators and things like that. So there are people who are kind of looking across the whole value chain. People who are now getting into support services for the spaceports that are being built. So there's quite a really emerging ecosystem of ground-based support services, to all these novel and disruptive new services up in space.
Interesting.
It is super interesting, what's going on. It's growing so fast. It outperforms pretty much every other sector of the UK economy.
Wow.
I was going to say except for financial services, but I'm not so sure what that looks like in the next, post-pandemic. I'm not sure exactly,
Very true.
But actually the space economy barely shrunk in the pandemic. And a lot of those companies that couldn't launch and had to postpone missions and things like that, they just pivoted to doing things like making ventilators and instead of rocket fuel they were doing hand sanitizers and stuff. So
something potentially to invest in,
just to keep them on the road.
Interesting. And so outside of lobbying for sustainability and your work in space, you also advise a lot of companies and just any kind of startups. Tell us a little bit about.
Well, I wouldn't say any kind of startup. I mean, I always say I'll kind of have a coffee with anybody, who wants to have a chat. My current portfolio they are mostly either space related or directly working in space, like Gravity Lab. I'm an advisor to ARKit. They are doing a quantum cybersecurity play. They're a kind of UK unicorn, which is great in quantum. But part of the reason I know them is because the founder was the founder of Avanti Communications, and I left government and he left Avanti around the same time. And they do have a satellite proposition as part of what they're doing. And I guess through that now also I'm an advisor to Quantum Exponential. That's a investment fund that's been set up specifically to invest in quantum startups. I'm an advisor to Multiply Space, which is a Brighton-based tech transfer company.
Oh, wow, I've never heard of them. Okay, cool.
Small,
I'll be checking that out.
Yeah, but
awesome.
I guess you're coming back to like the cochlear implants. There's an awful lot of in high-tech industry. There's an awful lot of intellectual property that could be leveraged into other markets, but because it's not core business, the people who own that IP tend to do nothing with it.
I see, yeah.
And so, she's developed methodologies that kind of help you unlock that,
Cool.
potential, which is good. So a sort of suite of spacey and space-related or space heritage-y things. Yeah.
And I guess all of them have, the same kind of challenges as all other businesses. What are your what are a few of your key not lessons, but like takeaways of what other founders should consider when running and starting their business?
Well, I would love to say that you can start a business and, have a work-life balance and all of that. But the reason that I sort of left startups and went into government is because, I had been through, as I said, like the bottom dropped out of the high yield bond market, et cetera. And I was 7 years in kind of successive, pan-European startups. And by the end of that, I just thought, I just want someone else to make the payroll, next month. And maybe the true entrepreneur would have gone on to their next one, but I was like, let me just see if I can do something that brings tech innovation in somewhere else where I just have a salary for a while. And I think I do tend to say to founders, it's all about growth, scale, how am I going to scale, And so I like to say, look, before you decide how you're going to scale, you go home and have a bottle of wine with your partner and you decide what you want your life to be like, for the next several years. Because actually scaling isn't for everybody. That's the truth, and what you maybe want to do is create a gym that you sell to somebody else to scale, and go on to your next thing. There was a company here where I was, again, on the advisory board for that founder. And, we finally, he realized that what he liked was, doing new stuff. He was, former PhD, he'd invented some stuff. He'd grown a company to about 30 people. And so he did a trade acquisition, and a buyout, and he just wanted the money to get a house in Scotland and see more of his kids and start his next company. He wanted the seed capital for his next company. And I think that's one of my key things is to say to founders, if you're not Bill Gates, that's okay, right? You don't have to be Bill Gates, but don't be conflicted about what, the journey that you want to be on with the company. Like if it's the right time for you to put the time in to scaling this thing, or you really believe that you are a person who can run a global multinational, then do that thing. Make your 5-year plan that takes you on that journey. But just, it's okay to say, actually what I want to do is really polish up this intellectual property and get someone else to buy it off me so I can do my next pet project. That's equally valid way to, use your brains and maybe less, painful for your personal relationships. So I think that's important. I do say that to people. And then I also, I guess another key thing I say to founders is don't accidentally lurch through all the pain points of being a little local company and then a regional expansion and then the national and then, gosh, should we export, If what you have is something that has a global market potential, then decide right now that you're going to behave like a big company, and don't just go for the low-hanging fruit. I mean, this is actually a piece of advice that I'm stealing completely from the founder of Man Bites Dog, but it was so sage to say, look, act big, go for the big clients, and I do say to founders now, in particular, if you're going to list, put your systems, your processes, your culture in place from day one so that when you become a public company, that's not a massive culture change for you, because that is where lots of founders, flounder. The board comes in and removes the founder because of the toxic culture or because they don't get governance or because, And so I always say, if you want to do that thing and take your company public, you kind of need to start from day one with the hygiene factor stuff that makes that transition less painful for you and your people.
Yeah, really, really great advice. And that first point, I think so many people get stuck in what everybody else is doing, and it's quite easy to forget, okay, what's my truth and what do I actually want to do as a company? And people get stuck in things they don't enjoy, right? So really, really great advice.
I do a lot of career coaching for young people too, and I'm always like, whatever you do in life, 80% of it, try and make that the thing that gets you up in the morning, because everything has its 20% downside. Mm-hmm. So you know, if you're going to start a company, make sure it's something you feel passionate about, you know, and just kind of be honest with yourself about just what the journey that you want to take that company on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, well, I feel very inspired to go into space, into the industry, not actual space, or both.
I just did a bunch of talks to year threes, and at the end of every single one of them, the three classes, they were like, so have you been to Mars? You know, and
I didn't ask you that question. Have you been to space?
And I always have the same answer. Like, I get severely motion sick on a roller coaster. The chance of me ever going to space is nil. I have no interest whatsoever. I'd love to watch a launch. And I do love, you know, the fact that you can, you know, look back from space. That I'm jealous of that, but I am not the person to. No.
Okay, right. Well, thank you so much. We've covered a lot of ground. I think we're all going to be dreaming about space tonight. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's, you know, my favorite topic.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.